finance report. Beth?
Good morning. Thank you. I'd like to begin with a brief budget overview and update and thank the members of the board who were at this morning's Multnomah County Tax Supervising and Conservation Commission, the TSCC. As I think everyone knows, the TSCC is an oversight body that ensures local governments comply with the budget law, and they examined our budget over the past month. Staff had presented it to them. Today they asked very detailed questions and found our budget in compliance and approved it. We'll be back to you for final approval for the adopted budget in June. As we've discussed over the last few months, our budget process this year has been more iterative and dynamic as we've had to adjust to reduced revenue estimates in the face of declining employment in the three counties. And you saw the headlines this morning for the Portland FMSA. The numbers for the unemployment rates in the three counties went up as well, and employment is down by almost 42,000 jobs in the three counties from this time last year. There was a bit of good news in our budget process this year, which you hear us talk about the federal economic stimulus. TriMet's receiving about $46 million of federal stimulus money we will receive that in fiscal year 10 for capital projects, and a small portion which is capital but will allow us to help offset some of our operating requirements. So to review where we've been and how we got to where we are, I looked back at what our projections were in the fall of 2008. When at that time we were forecasting only 1/4 of job losses and an underlying growth of just under 3%. And at the time, that seemed very reasonable, prudent. Our past growth in payroll taxes has averaged over 6.5% for the last 4 or 5 years. So reasonable assumptions at the time. But as I've been reporting to you over the last few months, the unprecedented and rapid drop in employment over the last 6 months, our budget now has an underlying decline of 1.5%. And when we include the scheduled payroll tax increase, we are actually looking at flat tax revenues between 2009 and fiscal year 10. The assumptions that we're using are consistent with forecasts made by outside economists. TriMet works with Eco Northwest, a Northwest forecasting firm, to do a specific forecast of our payroll tax revenues. We received their forecast in April, and their outlook projection for payroll tax revenues is exactly what ours is. So we feel that we are neither too optimistic nor too pessimistic. And our assumptions are also consistent with the state of Oregon's Office of Economic Analysis. So just a few highlights. I know you've looked at the budget. Our total operating revenues are $447 million. Total resources, when you include capital, are $867 million. Payroll taxes remain our largest source of resource revenue at $216 million. And passenger revenues we're projecting for the first time to be just over $100 million in fiscal year 10. They increased due to the new commuter rail service and the opening of the Green Line, which will bring new ridership. And then our operating budget does incorporate, as Fred has discussed over the last few months, over $7 million of federal stimulus money that is allowed to be used for operating expenses, and we are using this to directly offset the necessary cuts in service. And the budget, as we discussed earlier, has $23.6 million of expenditure cuts to bring spending in line with the new reduced revenue forecast. When we presented the proposed budget in April, we noted that we were going to monitor changes in the employment and payroll tax revenues and adjust the budget as necessary. And we feel we have not made any further downward adjustments to our revenues. We feel that we're at the right place. But at that time, we did note that there were reductions that had not been specified. There were placeholders in the budget, and the agency is in the process of identifying and implementing those remaining cuts. And we'll make the final revisions, prepare the budget resolution, and bring it to you next month for adoption. I'd like to turn now to the financial and operating report that you have in front of you, which shows our actual FY09 revenue and expenditures for April and year to date. And it shows where we are in the current fiscal year, which ends at the end of June. And what you'll see is that revenues and expenditures both remain under budget. Looking at revenues, I'm going to do a little accounting talk just to explain some of the numbers there. Public sector financial statements are presented on an accrual basis. So revenues are recognized in the financial statements when they're earned. So tax revenues are, we show them in the financials when people earn their wages every month, even though we don't receive revenues in an equal monthly stream. So the difference is evident when you look at the self-employment taxes in April. Self-employed individuals pay the payroll to the self-employment tax, but they pay it once a year on April 15th when they make their income tax payments. So under the accounting rules, we accrue this on an even basis monthly, but we only see what we actually get in one big sum in April. So when we received the money in April, it was lower than anticipated and lower than we've been budgeting. So we made an adjustment in April, so you'll see a negative number there. We've also been, over time, reducing the amount that we accrue for corporate payroll taxes to true up with the lower numbers that we're seeing. So if you look at the year-to-date results in the statements, you'll see that total operating revenue is about 4.5% below budget, and payroll taxes are about 7% below our budget last year. On the expense side, we also continue to see expenses under budget, and there's all the detail by department. The biggest reason for expenses being under budget is due to fuel prices that are lower than we had budgeted for a year ago. And because TriMet uses approximately 7 million gallons per year of diesel fuel, even a small if prices are even a bit lower than where we were budgeted, that's a big savings. So if you look at year-to-date, you see the expenses continue to be under budget, revenues are under budget, but revenues are a bit down more than expenses are. And I'd like to finish my comments by having you look at the portfolio summary of the investments. One thing that would stand out this month is you will see an increase in the market interest account for April. This is money that we had in cash, essentially in cash on April 30th, because we were calling bonds on May 1st, thus reducing TriMet's outstanding debt. In 2006, TriMet issued $230 million of bonds to fund a portion of the I-205 Portland Mall, the project that we're finishing now. And we pledged to bondholders that that would be repaid by FTA grants. When we sold the bonds, we told bondholders that if the FTA grants came in sooner than expected, we would be able to redeem those bonds early. And we did, in fact, receive a portion of the FTA grants earlier than we expected. And thus, we were able to call $43 million of bonds on May 1st, and we called another $33 million on May 15th. And so by redeeming those bonds earlier than anticipated, we're able to reduce the amount of interest that we have outstanding and reduce our budget for this year.
Very good. Good move. Questions?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Beth, would we be, just looking through this quickly, would we be better off putting more money in the treasury bonds than we are in the banks? I see the interest returns a lot higher on the treasury.
Yeah, we try to invest out as long as we can to meet our cash needs. So if we don't think we're going to need the money, say for construction for 3 or 4 months, then we'll buy a 4-month treasury. But I highlighted why we had so much in cash on April 30th because we needed the money the next day to pay down bonds. But we do try to do exactly what you're saying, even though the interest rates are very low, even at 3 or 4 months. But it's better than zero.
Okay, great. Thank you.